Are any of you engaged to be married? No? Okay. In the U.S., when a woman becomes engaged, she receives a diamond ring, usually. And diamonds are beautiful because they have facets in them. And what we'd like to start off with right now is just to have kind of a popcorn discussion of what are the facets of grace, where they catch the light of the gospel and then reflect that and refract that in brilliant colors. So let's just have some feedback, some input right now. Real quick, I am a high school teacher. I am not a theologian. You'll obviously realize that very quickly. And so for me, what makes the discussion work the best is we have some content and then we talk, and we have some content and then we talk. So let's start with input. What are the facets of grace? And this is not a test, it's just asking for input. And then we'll turn to the facets that I believe God has shown me in the last months as we've been preparing for this. So, what are facets of grace? You guys, what are the parts of grace? What are the pieces of grace? Undeserved. Perfect. Thank you.
Constant.
Constant. Okay. Sufficient. Beautiful. Again? Unlimited. I like that. Anything else? A gift. An undeserved gift. Acceptance. And all the men go, yes, we need that. Transformative. Flexibility. Yeah, I need that. Active. Oh, the grace, it's not passive. It is active. It is alive. Imaginative. Thank you, Barbara. Imaginative. I think we need to learn more from Einstein, how important imagination is as we share the gospel. Grace is imaginative. Okay. Well, good. Thank you for that. Today, we're going to take these facets and hopefully reflect them. And also, we're going to focus on the Apostle Peter. And the Apostle Peter is a very good example of grace in action. And we'll also be weaving in some dialogue and some examples from the men who've had an impact in the country where I work, in Germany. So we'll be learning from Martin Luther, and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and also from the men and women that I get to work with every day in a forgotten little armpit of Berlin. And the reason we call it the armpit is because it smells. It is pretty hairy. Some people that you live there, yes we do. And we learn grace every day from these folks. This is where I used to live. It's not an armpit. This is the coast of Oregon in the United States. And it's amazing when I would have friends come and visit how they would, when you've grown up with the ocean. We lived inland in the valley behind those mountains. But this is where we would go on the weekends. And when people would see the ocean for the first time, it's, wow. And that's grace. And when you see it for the first time, it's just immense and beautiful. But then when you would be able to classify people into 3 categories and how they interacted with the ocean. You would have people who would kind of walk up to it, but they would actually not touch it. And again, this is Oregon. It's a bit like the ocean in St. Andrews. People call it refreshing, and that's just a real word for cold. It's cold. It's freezing. When I first started working, I worked in Latin America. I was a teacher and a missionary in San Salvador. And I went to the beach and I got in the water and I jumped out because the water was hot. And this just did not compute. But this water is cold. Sometimes grace is freezing, refreshingly cold. Sometimes it is hot. This water was cold. And so people be like, I don't want to get wet. I don't want to get dirty. I don't want to get cold. Other people will go up and they'll kind of roll up their pants. And they'll put in their feet, maybe up to their knees, but they don't really want to commit. They don't really want to plunge in. And then you have people like my 12-year-old, who often without removing any clothing will just run in And my wife, who is was a competitive swimmer and a lifeguard, be careful of the riptide. And without any thought of cleanliness or coldness or danger, just plunges in to the water. And that is what I want to do with each and every one of you this morning, is to plunge into grace. If we think about discipleship without grace, and often we don't think we're not thinking about it without grace, but it can happen that way. We can be tricked and deceived. It ends up being like a car engine without any motor oil in it, and it simply burns itself up. And so let's plunge into the cold, refreshing, or warm waters of grace, whatever you would like, and we'll learn from Peter, because it's easier to learn through somebody else, especially with some of the hard lessons that he learned. You have some of Jerry Bridges' facets of grace: forgiveness of all of our sins and unconditional acceptance in Christ, deliverance from dominion of sin, and enabling power of Christ. These are things that I'm sure all of you already know, and it is something I'm sure you all and we all need to remember every single morning. Every single sin of ours is forgiven in Christ, past, present, and future. This hope and this love enables us to resist. It enables us to choose. We have been set free from a dominion of darkness and have a power that is greater, that we can resist sin and doubt and despair. Well, let's look at Peter. Point number 2. One of the participants here, John, said, you can tell that the people who speak have to submit their outlines months in advance because they're always different. Yeah, a lot of work has gone into this since I wrote the outline, but it will be relatively close. It might be a little bit different. You have the verses there that talk about Peter's calling. We'll call it grace in invitation, grace by invitation. Let me just read you the passage from Mark 16 to 18. Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he, Jesus, saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. As Jesus said to them, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." And immediately they left their nets and followed him. Follow me, a command, an imperative. And often when people preach on this, you hear about the immediacy, that this is such a powerful call, that such grace was extended to him through this command that he immediately dropped it. What I want to focus on this morning, and especially what I think Martin Luther, what Bonhoeffer will emphasize, is the totality of the invitation. This is not an invitation for a couple hours to hang out. This is an invitation to follow. And what do we see Peter do with his hands? He drops his livelihood and follows Christ. It is a radical call that grace gives. Well, back in the late 1400s, this man, Martin Luther, was on actually a good track to become a lawyer. His parents wanted him to become a lawyer, and he was doing quite well. A smart man, and the lore suggests that he was riding home from studies to his home and got caught in a storm. There is debate of whether this is actually true or not. And the storm was so bad that he prayed and said, "Lord, if you are there, if you deliver me home, I will become a Christian." And he was true to his word. He got home and he became a Christian. And so this illustration simply points out that when God calls us, we drop our nets, we drop legal careers or legal studies. We end up becoming fishers of a different type of creature. The point that I also want to make is somewhat of a selfish one, and that is that we get invited to his party and not our party. For those of you that were at the plenary last night, Dietrich Schindler wrote 2 semicircles, and that a lot of people want to invite Jesus to their party and have him host their party. And what Jesus is saying, I would like you to come into my kingdom. I want you to come to my wedding feast and be my guest. But it's not your party. This is best expressed by this guy. Can anybody guess who that might be? That's our youngest. Yeah. And people, oh, Jay, he's a little you. Well, I don't know. But there aren't many people that I've met when they look into those big eyes looking up like this that say no to Lars. They just, we are missionaries in Germany. And so often what we do is we are going around and asking people if they would like to support the ministry where we work. And we just decide we're just going to send Lars. Because no one says no to him. I mean, come on. And so the thing with Lars is that as soon as anybody else has a birthday, he starts talking about how it should be and that he should be basically the center of attention at this party. And then we get to explain to Lars, this is not your party. This is so-and-so's party. The attention will be on them. And then he just cries because he is not the life of that party. When we are called in grace, we are freed from being the life of the party. We are invited to celebrate true life, the true party of the wedding feast of the Lamb. Going on to point 3, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on this one. Peter's growth by asking questions, the verbal interactions with Jesus. This is as condensed as I could make it. There are a lot more examples of Peter's verbal interaction with Christ, but I try to take the ones that seem to be the ones that I understood the best, and also the ones that had points that we could relate to grace. Peter asked a fair amount of questions, and after you've been a high school teacher for a little while, after you've been a pastor, after you've been an evangelist, a discipler, you can learn a lot about people by the questions that they ask. Sometimes questions are honest attempts at getting information, and sometimes they're used as weapons or excuses. But look at some of the questions that Peter asks. Luke 12, is this for us all? And I think this was in the plenary the first night. Is there an in crowd? Is there an out crowd? Where are we situated in our status among other people? But the beauty of grace, it is for all those whom God has elected and called. Bonhoeffer ministered in one of his first public ministries, not in a church, but in a school. I don't know what it's like in the countries where you live, but in Germany, there is a state church. And the state church provides religious education. And so you will have people who believe in the Bible or believe in the gospel, believe in God, or not. Doesn't really matter if what you believe, but you can become a religion teacher, just like I'm an English teacher. And so he went into one of the more rough and tumble neighborhoods in Berlin and was like a high school, second level religion teacher. And people usually lasted maybe a week, maybe 2 in that position. What he did was simply tell them stories from the Bible, and they were hooked. He said the most effective stories actually came out of Revelation. That's what they wanted to hear about. Okay, again, interaction time. Who was learning when Dietrich Bonhoeffer was teaching rough and tumble teenagers in Wedding, Berlin? Who was learning? It's not a trick question. Both. Okay, so both are learning. What were the children learning? stories about Jesus, about grace, about discipleship, about real life. That there's more to life than this rough and tumble existence of uncertainty. In the early 1900s, what was Bonhoeffer learning? Power of the gospel. Was he a rich or a poor person, Bonhoeffer? Rich. At least for that time in that place. Rich. Was he a rough and tumble kid, or was he kind of elitist? Father was one of the best at what he did at the university as a professor. All of his brothers and sisters are incredibly successful in their fields. Okay. He was not a rough and tumble kid, but he learned to share the gospel with rough and tumble kids and invite them into his home. And they trashed it. They trashed their summer home. And he said, yeah, the housekeeper was upset, but she got over it. He learned a lot at a very critical point in his ministry of what it means that it doesn't matter if you're well-to-do, highly intellectual, rough and tumble kids who don't really have much hope. Grace is for us all. Point C, the John passage, where are you going? I'll die for you. Just to know that grace allows us to have a genuine zeal, that we can really lay it out on the line. And we may look foolish, but zeal is part of grace. Matthew passage, what comes out of the mouth, explain this to us. I don't know about you, but I often need a tutorial. Someone to actually sit with me and explain, okay, Jay, this is just where you are not getting it. You've got the zeal, you're an excited guy, but you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer. We get tutorials from the grace of God. Point E, how many times to forgive? This is deep learning. This is not only head knowledge, but the heart. A deep truth of His grace. Stop counting. Stop keeping track. Those of you in discipleship, those of you in any type of friendship, coworker, those of you who wear a ring and are married, understand that grace allows us to stop keeping track of other people's sins. We have new coworkers from the US, and they are loud. Even as Americans, we say our friends are loud. German law actually says you have to be quiet from usually 8 to 10 at night, depending on the apartment building you're in. But I think the law is 10 to 6. Is it 10 to 6 by law? And then 1 to 3 in the afternoon. If you are loud, your neighbors call the police if they want to, and you're in trouble. Well, these are loud Americans, and they have 3 loud children, and they're moving into an apartment 2 weeks ago. And so, they're carrying up chairs and banging into the banister. It's a thin metal banister on the staircase. And the lady on the bottom floor has a dog, and the dog goes insane when anybody breathes on the banister. And these people are just banging into it. And so she, reports them, and that's just not usually the way we want to train our new coworkers on how to make friends for the gospel. So that's one thing. So we meet and we iron that out and say, look, they did not know there were quiet hours. They're learning German. They're learning the laws. Please, if there's a problem, please contact us and we will help teach them. You don't need to report it to the authorities. She's like, well, I have that right. I'm like, I understand that. We're just asking that you would help them learn. And so this lady is just not happy. And I forgot one of the best parts. Okay, Bonhoeffer, that's not their neighbor. That's their neighbor. She has this fire red hair. And you may see some of that here in Poland too. In Berlin, it's just a little brighter than what I've seen around here. It's just lightning fire red. And it really freaked one of our coworkers out. When the wife of the couple came, she was just like, that hair scares me. It's like, it's just hair. But anyway, but then it turned out that the lady with the fire hair had the personality to match. And so it kind of is one of these things where Laura just had this now a fear of man with her neighbor. And again, that's what we're trying to work against with grace. Well, we also have balconies on almost every apartment. And on your balcony, if you are a good neighbor, you put a flower box or 2 or 3. That just means that you care about how other people see your apartment. And we didn't do this for years because we were like, we don't care. And people were really upset with us that we did not care enough about them to put flower boxes out. I'm like, okay. So we bought some and put them out. So then we tell our new coworkers, you got to put flower boxes out to show the people that you love them. It's like, okay, very well. Well, she's putting flower boxes out and somehow part of it snaps off and falls down. They're on the 4th floor. And of course, what happened? It falls on the lady, you know. Well, it fell on her laundry. I mean, it didn't hurt anybody, but it fell on her laundry and messed up her laundry. And then of course their daughter runs out to see what happened and drops something else. I mean, it's like a comedy sketch. You're just like, oh, stop, stop the madness. And the neighbor is just, like this, and the flames are just coming. Okay, we'll go down, we'll sort this out. And Laura, we meet every 2 weeks to pray with our coworkers. And Laura's just kind of coming unglued about the pressure that she's feeling. And then in a gospel moment of clarity, she says, this has to be an opportunity to love well. This lady does not love her, wants her to be gone, would rather report her to the police than talk with her. And this is what it means to love her neighbor well in the grace of Christ. The Langs, the family that has come to minister with us in this armpit of Southeast Berlin, left jobs, left family. And Peter asks, we have left everything. What will we have? And if we think about that question, it's like, well, look what I've done for you. What do I get out of this? Again, we learn a lot from people's questions. Let me read a little bit from Matthew 19. Again, I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. And the disciples were greatly astonished. Who then can be saved? And Jesus answered, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And Peter said, see, we have left everything and followed you. What then will we have? Jesus said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, in the new world, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel, and everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or children, or lands, for my name's sake, will receive 100-fold and will inherit eternal life. To follow him, we are also blessed with not only the grace of following him, but the grace of a promise. His promises do not fail. Go on to John 13. Do you wash my feet? Peter thought he knew what Christ was about. He thought he understood. You're the Messiah. That means X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean that you wash my feet. Martin Luther has this wonderful little book called Table Talks. And it's, if you haven't read it, it would be a good recommendation. If you just like to hear a guy who just shoots straight from the hip and tells you exactly what he thinks, no holds barred. Very, at least in my opinion of living with Germans for the last 12 years, very refreshing. Sometimes like sandpaper, but very refreshing. What he says, page after page after page after page, about what does it mean when you're trying to talk with someone and they have said, we know all there is about the Bible, we know all there is about Jesus. Let me give you the short version. Run away. If you are talking with someone who claims that they know it all about grace, about Jesus, about the Bible, Martin Luther, smart man, says, flee. In your notes, there's a connection to Acts 4:13. People saw the disciples' boldness and perceived a lack of education. And I love that, because I feel that every day. People look at me and they perceive a lack of education. But they recognize, there's this perception and recognition. Two different verbs, but both very important. They were with Jesus. They had been with the Lord. That is grace. Well, we've talked a lot about Peter learning, asking questions, learning deep grace. And then it comes to a point in discipleship where you walk in that grace. And it's grace in action. And when they were on the sea, the disciples saw him walking, and they were terrified and said, "It's a ghost!" And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come out to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Jesus immediately reached out his hand, took hold of him, saying to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" Sometimes learning this walk in Christ is not pretty. We had the benefit of thinking we had learned German as students, and then getting to Germany and realizing we didn't. We would walk in and attempt to explain something, and we realized the international sign for what is, because we just got it all the time. People like John, people like my children, they grew up knowing both languages. It is beautiful. When people come cross-cultural, it can be really, really ugly. Some of the best parts is when we first got there, I asked for this at a restaurant. And I got this. So I'm not sure how that got miscommunicated, but that's what it looked like that day. Later, and this is 10 years later, I asked for this. What is this? Anybody know what this is? Hummus. Yeah. I think one of the best of God's gifts to the earth, personally. And so does Lars, and so he tries to eat most of it. And when I asked for this, I got that. So apparently, all Americans want this and this. So this sense of just not understanding the difference of how to pronounce clearly hummus and pommes. They sound close in a restaurant or in a loud market. But sometimes it's even more embarrassing than that, because you are responsible for leading the discipleship group because someone else who's supposed to be leading it, the German, is also a vice president of a bank, and he's on a trip. So you take over, say, no problem, I'll do that. And so you're teaching this, and we're saying we need to be salt and light. This outward focus of discipleship, this is too good to keep with us. And most of the people that we live with just aren't real sure that they can be confident enough to talk to this about this important stuff with people, because there's a high distrust in Eastern Germany, with good reason. 60 years of the Stasi is a big deal. You don't just snap and that stuff goes away. But look, guys, this is so true, and God's love is so big. We have to share this truth and love. And we need to be like salt and light, shining out. And what they heard me say is we need to be like salt and light, radiating with nuclear energy, because I left off one prefix. So I was communicating this, and they heard that. I'm like, no, no, not radiating, not poisoning people. No. This is what the grace of the gospel is. This is what discipleship is. And again, I left off a prefix. At other times, the walk of grace is incredibly terrible and gorgeous all at the same time. And I would like to ask you, does anybody know at the start of when Hitler was coming to power in 1935, where was Dietrich Bonhoeffer? Not in the States, in a lesser-known English-speaking country. Yeah. From what I read in the biography, he was in England. He was pastoring a couple German congregations in England. And everybody told him, do not come back. On your life, do not come back. And he had to. He had to come back because without coming back, he would have said, no one would have believed what I was saying. He preached the gospel and then knew because he was preaching it and believed in it, he had to go back and show that he believed in it with his life. Interaction time again. In East Berlin, people do not believe us because they don't know us and we don't share a history. And so what we do is we say the same thing day after day, week after week, year after year, until people say, you keep saying that, I think it may be true. And then step 2 of this dance of trust is that we attempt to do what we actually say. And when we blow it, we admit it and confess it and request forgiveness. My question for us as disciple-making leaders, disciple-making shepherds, are we consistent with what we say? Is the grace of God so intrinsic? Is it so washing over us like the ocean and shaping us like a shoreline in Oregon that we are simply saying the same thing over and over so that we develop a trust with the people who are skeptical, whether they believe in the gospel yet or not? They are skeptical of this really matters for what I'm dealing with on this day. And then are we walking the talk? Even if we stumble, are we actually walking it out? Take literally about 1 minute and just think about those 2 questions. And I'd like just to have a few of you offer up, be vulnerable, and talk about what that actually looks like. How does it look like for you to be saying the same thing over and over and over in the grace and the truth of Christ, and then also walking into it? Being patient, being willing to wait on others, handling difficult personalities, peacemaking. These are parts of the walk of grace. The English teacher part of me wants to wait you out and stare everybody down and you will participate. Let's not do that because we're at the ELF and time doesn't wait. So I think what will make sense is let's keep, if you're thinking, yeah, I might want to contribute that, we are going to hopefully have about 20 minutes at the end of when I stop rambling, and you will actually have a chance to talk. And so maybe we could do that within smaller groups. That might be a better idea anyway. Okay, moving on then to point 5. When we walk the talk, we trip, stumble, and fall. It does happen. And Peter's a pretty good example of that. Now when Jesus came to the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do you say that I am? Who is the Son of Man? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. He said to them, but who do you say I am? Simon Peter replied, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And Jesus answered him, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, For flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. Grace reveals truth to us that we have no other resource to have. It is the only way that we understand God, is through his revelation. So Peter, this beautiful part of where he is blessed because he has been the object of this revelation, or the channel of this revelation. And then it goes on in Matthew 16. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem, suffer for many things from the elders and the chief priests and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside. I don't know what it's like in your family, but when little Lars tries to be big Lars, we take him aside. Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you." And Jesus does not say, "Blessed be you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for this has been revealed to you." What does he say? "Get behind me, Satan." So within the span of a few short verses, "Blessed be you for what has been revealed to you. Get me behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." For Peter, he understood that Jesus was the Messiah, and for the Messiah to be cursed and die was unthinkable. He was very modern in that way. Today, if Peter was around, he's postmodern. He's like, "Oh yeah, I can see those things fitting together." But for someone in this time, in this age and culture, this was unthinkable. And for those of us that are modern, and for those of us that are postmodern, and then whatever comes after that, we still live with this paradox of grace. That God chooses, the power ultimate of the universe, chooses to reveal himself to those that are hindrances at the same time. We are blessed and we are rebuked all at the same time. This is a difficult truth, and whenever I get into a difficult truth, I usually refer to somebody else. So what I want to read to you is someone that I think talks about this sense of paradox with grace, of it being free to us, costing Christ everything, but then out of this cost of Christ, what it means for us to think about being a hindrance, even though we are blessed with this revelation. So we're going to try and tackle all that with a quotation here from Bonhoeffer. "Cheap grace is not the kind of forgiveness of sin which frees us from the toils of sin. Cheap grace is the grace we bestow on ourselves. Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance, baptism without church discipline, communion without confession, absolution without personal confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ, living and incarnate. Costly grace is the treasure hidden in the field. For the sake of it, a man will gladly sell all that he has. It is the pearl of great price to buy, which the merchant will sell all his goods. It is the kingly rule of Christ, for whose sake a man will pluck out the eye which causes him to stumble. It is the call of Jesus Christ, at which the disciple leaves his nets and follows him. Costly grace is the gospel, which must be sought again and again, the gift which must be asked for, the door at which a man must knock. Such grace is costly because it calls us to follow, and it is grace because it calls us to follow only Jesus Christ. It is costly because it costs a man, a woman, his or her life. It is costly because it condemns sin, and grace because it justifies the sinner. Above all, it is costly because it cost God the life of his Son. Ye were bought at a price, and what has cost God much cannot be cheap for us. Above all, it is grace because God did not reckon his Son too dear a price to pay for our lives, but delivered him up for us. Costly grace is the incarnation of God. This book is The Cost of Discipleship. I give this to everyone that comes to work with us. And just wanted to share a little bit of it with you. The price paid for us as hindrances is more cherishable, is more valuable than we can imagine. And we know this. It inspires us, it sets us free to receive the revelation and to serve with joy in his grace. Moving on to point 6, Peter's denial predicted and fulfilled. Grace in spite of failure. I love Peter because he just sticks his foot in his mouth. I do this all the time. I have really big feet, and that's hard getting a size 13 foot in the mouth, and it does not taste good. But Peter says, even though all those others will fall away, even if I must die for you, I will not deny you. Matthew 26. And then they go to the garden. He falls asleep. Great foreshadowing of how he won't be there with Christ. And then at that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, have you come out as against a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple, teaching. You did not seize me. But all this has taken place to fulfill the scriptures of the prophets. Then all the disciples left him and fled. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and the servant girl came up to him and said, you also were with Jesus the Galilean. But he denied it before them all, saying, I don't know what you mean. And when he went into the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied it with an oath, I don't know the man. And after a little while the bystanders came up and said to Peter, certainly you are too one of them, for your accent betrays you. And I don't know about you, but when you're in a foreign country, your accent really does betray you. And then he began to invoke a curse on himself and to swear, I do not know the man. The rooster crowed immediately. Peter remembered the saying of Jesus. He went outside and wept bitterly. I'm sure most of you have heard this, or all of you have heard this many times and preached on very well. I want to just point out a couple things that I think have to do with grace and discipleship. We need to be crystal clear about who we are and who we are not. People look to see what we say and what we do. Peter says, I don't know what you mean. It's one of those linguistic sidesteps, and he's trying to just get out of the way of the question. Then he actually engages with the question. And after that fails, of denying that, his fear of man leads him into solitude and bitterness. His desire to try and honor, out of fear, their question led to ultimate ruin. He left Christ, and then he didn't have anybody else around him either except tears. What I want to show us this morning, though, is the beauty. And I don't know if it seems apparent that there is beauty in a man being by himself, weeping tears. But I think we all need to come to a point where we get to the end of ourselves. We have nothing left but Christ. And the beauty here is that Christ told him this would happen, and that there was surety of Christ's grace before the weeping and the tears. We won't go too much into what Luther said about sin boldly. I put that in there a long time ago to try and lighten things up, and then I realized that just wasn't the right place to lighten things up. So what he meant was to admit publicly when we sin. He did not mean you guys go crazy at the bars tonight and say, hey, we're sinning. Okay, and Jay said it was okay, Greg. That's not what we're talking about. What it means is that I look into the eyes of my students' teachers and say, yes, I have a problem with anger, and that may be affecting my children. And they just kind of get really uncomfortable. It means that we are honest with ourselves and with the people that we are discipling and who are discipling us. One of the men that I disciple, I don't have a picture of Andre, but he is the most perfectionistic person I've ever met. I thought I was perfectionistic until I met him. And I realized, nope, not even close. I'm working on it. One day I was so tired that when I came over to his house, he was still doing some stuff. I'm like, I'm just going to lay down on your floor and rest. Jay, you can't lay down on the floor. I said, Andre, your floor is cleaner than my bed. And just laid down. Please don't tell Holly I said that. But this is a man who came to Christ in December, late December, and he, like I, are recovering Pharisees, and he gets really upset when I'm 1 minute late. And I'm at least 1 minute late every time. And I do things that really bother him. And I said, Andre, I'm just really glad that you understand that you received discipleship from Christ, and I'm just involved in the process. One of the most difficult things I had to say was in early January, because he and his wife were going to get a divorce. And this man had just come to Christ. And I don't know about what it's like in your situations, but we have labored in East Berlin for 12 years. And all of a sudden, people are starting to come to Christ like mad. And so each person that comes to Christ, it's just beautiful and precious. And you start to disciple this person, and 2 weeks after they become a Christian, they say, I think I'm going to divorce my wife. And I was sorely, sorely tempted. I literally wanted to say, well, we can talk about that. And in my head, I'm like, well, if he divorces her, maybe they can get reconciled and get married again later. The most important thing is to keep encouraging him. And I think I heard Jesus said, get behind me, Satan. You're a hindrance to me. And so what I think the Holy Spirit said through my mouth was, Andre, you have been healed with the gospel of Christ. And that doesn't mean you alone. That means you and your heart and your soul and your mind and your body and your marriage for your kids. And he didn't want to hear it. He was upset. And I thought, he's going to walk away. It's my fault. He runs marathons. I used to run marathons. And so one of his favorite things is to go drag me out and punish me for miles at a time while he trains for his next race. And during one of these runs that we had, he told me that he and his wife are going to start a biblical counseling program and be reconciled if God allows it. That's grace. That is grace in our life. And it didn't feel great at first, but it was the truth in love. And Christ is using it to honor himself. Well, let's try and wrap up quickly. At the very end of John, we see Peter fishing. After he has denied Christ, he's fishing in a boat. He's gone back to his old life. Christ comes and sits on the beach, has a little barbecue, and they realize it's Jesus. Peter puts on a coat and jumps in the water, and then goes and sits and brings the amazing catch that they brought. And Jesus says to him, "Do you love me?" 3 times. Peter says, "Yes, you know I love you. Feed my sheep, tend my sheep, feed my lambs. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted, but when you are old, you will stretch out your hands and another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go." And this he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, "Follow me." The parallel of Mark 1, 17 and 18, and here in John 21, bowled me over for the first time of seeing Peter fishing, dropping his nets, following Christ, learning, walking, growing, stumbling, falling, denying. And then he starts fishing again. And except with the part of, "Come, have breakfast with me. Do you love me?" the command to feed, he tells the one that he loves, "Follow me." And for me, this is a rough draft. And you are all welcome to tear this apart and to say, "No, that doesn't work. No, it's this and more of that." If you want to work with me on this, I would welcome that, not necessarily right now, but over email or something like that. It just seems to me that Christ took Peter, invited him in grace to do this grace of discipleship, and then it comes not to the same point, but at a different point, but still that same thing, and we get back to, "Peter, follow me." I don't know where you are today. I know that I need to be told every day, "Follow me to my feast, for my will, for my glory, and not your own." Just talking quickly then for the last point of Peter's ministry, what it looks like when he does follow him. Boldness, what we would call as ministry success. 3,000 people coming to faith in a relatively short time. Not bad. Signs, wonders, people being saved, healing people who are lame, getting arrested, and then preaching to the people who arrest them. More people coming to faith, more people being healed, beaten and threatened, and rejoicing at being worthy of suffering. I think often we focus on boldness, the healings, the amount of people in the church, the amount of people who are becoming Christians. Personally, the people who support our ministry want to know both sides. They want to know, where is God moving and healing people and bringing them to faith? And they want to know, where are we being threatened and beaten? It's the part of grace that God includes in those who reflect Christ. Bonhoeffer says, when we suffer, it makes discipleship real. It makes it real to us, but even more than that, it makes it real to those that are looking at us going, "I don't think they really believe that." And when we suffer, they see that we're willing to go through this because we believe. Point 9, grace allows us in discipleship to know God more fully. It allows us to know Him with our minds and our hearts, and thus we are then allowed to grow as God's field. And then we are allowed to not just keep this to ourselves, but to share the life and faith and hope and love that we have been given in grace with others. I'd like to take the rest of the time for you. I have questions here as something that may help the discussion, but my heart's desire would be that at your tables, you just like, okay, this I would love to talk about, and you guys just generate your own discussions. If you want to have questions, I have some here for you. Please come get them if you'd like. But let's just wrap up the rest of the time with you discussing, and then just maybe 5 minutes before, we might just have some input. What did you guys talk about? Anything that you think would help edify the group? Okay? Okay, teacher checkpoint. Is everything clear about what we're about to do? We're clear? Everybody understand? Okay.